Welcome to PhilotiMaths, fighting problems one step at a time.
Hello and welcome to PhilotiMaths. Today we're having a lesson on inverse functions. Let's have a look at an example. Okay, in this first example here, we've got to find the inverse of f of x equals x plus 3. Now remember, the inverse of any function is just the reverse of the function. So to find the inverse function, we're going to take the formula for the function and we're going to write it, instead of f of x, we're going to write y, because it just helps to make our algebra simpler. So instead of f of x equals x plus 3, we're going to write y is equal to x plus 3. Okay, now to find the inverse, what we're going to do is take this formula here and we're going to make x the subject of this formula. So to do that, we're going to need to move this plus 3 to the left-hand side. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides of the formula. So that makes the left-hand side now equal to y minus 3. And the right-hand side is now just simply equal to x, because the plus 3 and the minus 3 cancel out. Okay, well we've made x the subject of this formula now. Let's just make that super clear by writing x on the left-hand side. So just swapping these around. So we've got x is equal to y minus 3. Okay, so we're now ready to find the inverse. So all we need to do now is we're going to write this exact same formula here, but instead of writing x, we're going to write f inverse of x. So this minus 1 here just stands for the inverse function. Now the right-hand side of the equation, instead of writing y, we're going to write x, and then the minus 3 stays the same. So all we do is we take this and we swap the x for an f inverse of x, and we swap the y for an x, and we do that regardless of what the formula is. And that gives us our inverse function here. So we've got f inverse of x is equal to x minus 3. Now just to point out, this makes sense that this is the inverse of this function, because f here takes x and then it adds 3. So it makes sense that the inverse function, which is the reverse of the function, takes x and subtracts 3, because minus 3 is the opposite of plus 3. Okay, in this second example, we've got to find the inverse of g of x equals 2x minus 5. Now notice here we've got g of x instead of f of x, but actually that makes no difference to the method of finding the inverse function. So we're still going to use the same steps as before. So that means the first step is to write this out, but instead of g of x, we're going to write y. So we're going to have y is equal to 2x minus 5. Okay, now the next step is to make x the subject of this formula. So the first thing we're going to do is try and cancel out this minus 5 here. So we can do that by adding 5 to both sides of the formula. So that leaves us with the left-hand side as y plus 5, and the right-hand side as just 2x, because the minus 5 and the plus 5 cancel out. Okay, so what we've got now is y plus 5 is equal to 2x. Now remember, 2x really means 2 multiplied by x. So in order to find x, we're going to divide both sides of the formula by 2 to cancel out this times by 2. So that leaves us with the left-hand side as y plus 5 all divided by 2. And the right-hand side is just x, because the times 2 and the divide by 2 cancel out. Okay, so we've actually made x the subject of the formula now, and just like before, let's make that a bit clearer by writing x on the left-hand side by just swapping this around. So we're going to have x is equal to y plus 5 divided by 2. So now the last step is just to write this out again, but instead of writing x, we're going to write g inverse of x, because remember this is a g this time. So we're going to have g inverse of x is equal to, and then just like before, instead of y, we're going to swap that now for an x. So we're going to have x plus 5 divided by 2. And that is our inverse function. G of x is equal to x plus 5 divided by 2. Finally then, we've got this example, find the inverse of f of x equals x squared minus 2. And we've been given this extra piece of information here, which is that x is bigger than or equal to 0. So we're only going to use this bit of information right at the end of our working, so I'll explain that when we actually get to it. For now, we're going to use the same steps as before. We're going to write this out the same, but instead of f of x, we're going to write y. So we're going to have y is equal to x squared minus 2. Okay, now we're going to need to make x the subject of this formula here. So the first thing we're going to do is add 2 to both sides of the formula so that we can cancel out the minus 2 here. So that means the left-hand side will now equal y plus 2, and the right-hand side will equal x squared minus 2 plus 2, and these just cancel out, so we're just going to be left with x squared. Okay, we've now got y plus 2 is equal to x squared. So in order to find x, we're going to have to square root both sides because that's the opposite of squared. So let's square root both sides of the formula. So the left-hand side is going to be the square root of y plus 2, and the right-hand side is equal to x. Now, here's where we're going to use this information here that x is bigger than or equal to 0. Because normally, when we square root a number, what we have is a plus or a minus before the square root, because square roots can be positive or negative. But they tell us here that x is bigger than or equal to 0. So because this square root here is equal to x, we don't need to put the plus or minus because x can't be negative. So that's why we've used this information here. Okay, we've made x the subject of the formula, so what we're going to do is make that clear by writing x on the left and then swapping this to the right hand side. So we've got x is equal to the square root of y plus 2. So then the final step is to write this out, but instead of x, we're going to write f inverse of x. And then instead of y, we're going to write x. So we get the square root of x plus 2. Okay, thanks for watching. This has been a short lesson on finding the inverse of a function. See you next time. Have you suffered from a maths-related injury in the last 4 months?
You're in the right channel. Welcome to PhilotiMaths.
Okay, in this example, we've been asked to find the inverse of f of x equals x plus 1. So this here is our function.
You said x plus 1.
Oh, I did, didn't I? Yeah, sorry. Okay, in this first example here, we've got to find the inverse of f of x equals x plus 1. Now remember, oh my god! Let's do that again. Okay, in this first example here, we've got to find the inverse of f of x equals x plus 3. Yay, I did it!
Well done. Let's move on to the next scene.
So if we add 2 to both sides of the formula, the left-hand side is going to be y plus 2, which is just y plus 2. Is it? No.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely going to be 1 plus 2.